Welcome to Fun Palais Podcast, where we are unpacking opinions and changing destinations. I am your host, Shirley Altador, where each week we will chat about how to rise strong out of all types of obstacles that come with relationships. Through personal life experiences and discussions ranging from infidelity, trust, forgiveness, sex, heartbreak, self-love, and so much more. I am passionate and obsessed to provide guidance to every woman to create a better life. Let's dive in, pull up a seat, make sure you're cozy, and get ready to be challenged and encouraged while you learn. With me, your virtual girlfriend. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Fun Palais Podcast. Before we start this episode is titled Frank King on Mental Health and Comedy. And I wanted to just put a small disclaimer out there. Mental health and someone's financial situation are two different things. A financial situation may trigger a symptom in mental illness, but financial situations are one of the many triggers for suicide and sometimes has absolutely nothing at all to do with someone's suicide. So please keep that in mind. Even though I may make mention of me not feeling suicidal during any financial situation I may go through, but everyone is different. And again, remember, it might be a trigger for some and not all. So please keep an open mind when listening to this episode. Frank King himself does suffer from the mental illness of having suicidal thoughts at times. And as you listen to the podcast, you will hear more. But this is just a small disclaimer that I wanted to put out there before the podcast start, that suicide and mental illness is real. And even though there are a few moments where we are laughing, it is not a laughing matter. And it is something to take serious, rather friends or family or coworker or anyone you know might be going through this situation. Thank you for listening and enjoy. Today we have a special guest, Frank King. He is the mental health comedian, suicide prevention speaker, best-selling author, and speaker and marketing coach. Frank, I want to thank you for being on the show today. I really appreciate you being my guest. One of the reasons I reached out to you for being on the show is, number one, the one thing that caught my eye is you're a comedian, but you talk about suicide prevention. So I'm very interested in hearing about that. And the other thing that resonated with me when I watched your YouTube video is a few years back, you said you were having car problems. Three things came to mind. Either get the car fixed, get a new car, or kill myself.
Correct.
And that's the reason why I reached out to you. So these two reasons right here are what resonated with me. So Frank, introduce yourself to everybody, who you are, what you are, and let's get started here.
Well, and I want everybody to know who's listening that I didn't want to be here. It's all part of a plea bargain. I can't go into detail, but it's a financial crime. Nothing. No. That's my stock answer, by the way, when people say, "Why did you move to Eugene, Oregon?" Well, it's part of a plea bargain, and it never fails to get a laugh. And the question is often, and when I do a keynote, I address it immediately. It's the elephant in the room.
Yes.
I even tell the audience, I know what you're thinking. Comedian? Suicide?
Yeah.
Depression? How does that work? Well, I think a comedian's a good choice for a number of reasons. One, if you think about it, the original comedian was a court jester. And the court jester's job was to speak truth to power on behalf of the powerless with humor. And I believe that my job is to speak truth to the power of mental illness on behalf of those often powerless in its grip with humor. Number two, I believe where there's humor, there's hope. Where there's laughter, there's life, that nobody dies laughing.
Exactly.
And number three, depression and suicide run in my family. There are more nuts in my family than in a squirrel turd.
Oh.
That's a very Southern expression. My grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her, and that's in my first TEDx talk. My great aunt died by suicide. My mother and I found her. I was 4 years old. I screamed for days. And My mother, I believe, died of suicide slowly, cigarettes and alcohol. And in 2010, at the height of the recession, my speaking business had dropped off 80%. My wife and I lost everything in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy.
Okay.
And that's when I learned what the barrel of my gun tasted like. I have 2 mental illnesses. Oh, by the way, spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger.
As we can see.
Yes. Well, a friend of mine, Glenn Friesman, came up to me after a keynote. He'd never heard me say that out loud.
Mhm.
I didn't pull the trigger. He comes up and he goes, "Hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger?" I go, "Hey, man, could you try to sound slightly less disappointed?" Uh, and that's the humor, by the way. I don't do jokes about suicide. I tell funny, personal anecdotes, things people
Gotcha.
have said to me. I was talking to my favorite meeting planner.
Mhm.
There's a nonprofit called NAMI, National Alliance Mental Illness.
Okay.
And every county's got a chapter. For a county of any size has a chapter. And the great thing, they offer peer counseling, family-to-family counseling classes. And the great thing about NAMI, National Alliance Mental Illness, everything they do is free. So I'm talking to the meeting planner, Michelle. I'm going to do a keynote at the kickoff lunch for their big walk where they raise a lot of money.
Gotcha.
And she says to me, and she's well aware I put a gun in my mouth. She says to me, I said to her, "What do you want me to talk about in my keynote?" And
Mhm.
she says, "Oh, I don't know. Just give me some bullet points." So I let that hang in the air. And she comes, I'm so sorry. Oh,
Bullet
I can't believe I
points.
said it. And that was 5 years ago. And we were talking yesterday because I'm going to testify before the Oregon legislature on the parity,
Okay.
supposed parity between mental and physical health coverage.
Gotcha.
And she goes, "You're never going to let me live that down, are you?" I go, "Absolutely not." I tell that
No.
story every time I go online. So that's where the humor, the mental health comedian, comes in.
Okay.
Backstory on my comedy: told my first joke in 4th grade. Everybody laughed. The teacher was hysterical. 12th grade, I did the talent show. First person ever to do stand up. 1975, spring of 75, I did stand up. I won.
Okay.
My mom insisted I go to college because that's how my family is.
Okay.
She goes, "You're going to college. I don't care what you do when you get done. You can be a goat herder for all I care. But you, my son, are going to be a goat herder with a college degree." So I got a degree in political science and one in labor management relations, and then moved to San Diego. And just by chance, in San Diego, there was a comedy store, a branch of the world famous one on Sunset in LA. And they had 2 or 3 open mic nights. This is like the beginning of the comedy boom. So I went in, I did my 5 minutes, and inside my head, I heard this: "You are home." Second thing I heard was, "I'm going to do this for a living." Third thing I heard was, "I have no idea how that looks, but I'm going to make it work." So that's I started doing stand up there. A year later, I had enough comedy under my belt that I went on the road as a full time professional comedian. Said to my girlfriend then, now my wife
Okay.
of 33 years, "I'm going on the road to be a stand up comedian. Do you want to come along for the ride?" Figuring she'd go, "Oh, heck no." And she goes, "Yeah."
Oh, true
Yep.
love.
Gave up the apartment, gave up my jobs, put a bunch of stuff in storage, and we were on the road together 2,629 nights in a row nonstop.
Nice.
Opened up for Rosie and Ellen and Seinfeld and Dennis Miller and Foxworthy and Steve Harvey. And anyway, it was a great time to be mid-20s, mid-30s, traveling the road, doing comedy. And then that kind of died. The boom busted. And so I've always been very clean comedian. So I jumped to the corporate side.
Okay.
Oftentimes they'll have an awards banquet or something, an association. They want,
Okay.
some entertainment.
Yes.
Rode that till 2007 or 8. And that's when the trouble began with the recession.
Gotcha.
Bookings dropped off. We lost everything in bankruptcy. And that's when I had time, place, and method selected, and I was going to kill myself because I had $1 million life insurance policy. My wife would be brokenhearted, but she wouldn't be broke. People who are suicidal often have something called a burdensomeness. You believe that the world would be better off without you. Everybody would be better off without you. And I knew my wife would be financially far better off. I was actually worth more dead than alive. So fortunately, and I'm sure if you asked her at that time, she would have said, "No, don't kill yourself.
Yeah.
I don't want the money. I want you."
Yes.
But you're in that state of mind where and the reason I'm still here is that I had a life insurance policy, $1 million. However, It had a 2-year suicide clause, and it only had the life insurance policy 22 months. So I had to wait 2 months to kill myself.
Oh,
Because I have chronic suicidal ideation, which means for me and people like me, suicide's always an option as a solution for problems large and small. And they use the example you gave. For example, my car broke down, had 3 thoughts, get it fixed, buy a new one, just kill myself.
yeah.
So every time I tell that, every time I've told it since 2014, there's been one person, sometimes more in the audience, who have chronic suicidal ideation, but they're not aware it has a name. They think they're just some kind of freak, because the way their brain works,
Yeah.
and completely alone. And so this is one of the most satisfying and therapeutic things for me. People come up to me afterwards, and you can see the relief on their face that it's a thing. Other people have it.
They found somebody like, I am not alone.
Young woman came up after a college show. She goes, I want to thank you for your keynote. You're welcome. She said, but I got to tell you, it made me weep. How'd it make you weep? She said, your story about the car, get it fixed, buy a new and just kill yourself. I go, yeah. She goes, I've been having those thoughts all my life. I thought it was just me. I thought I was some kind of freak and completely alone. And when I heard you say that out loud, I realized for the first time in my life that I am not alone, and I wept. Very therapeutic for me.
Now, I have a question for you, Frank, because
Yeah.
I don't think like that. So that's why I wanted to reach out to you, because obviously I'm not going to consider myself normal, because I think everybody's a little abnormal in their own little special way. But I've never, in my 37 years on this earth, I've never thought of killing myself. I've had financial issues. I've had situations where I couldn't pay my credit cards, where I didn't know how we were going to pay the rent this month. Month was tight, but killing myself never crossed my mind. Does that make me different?
Well, you're probably, I used to say normal, but then people gave me a hard time. Who's normal? Okay, fine. You're probably what they call neurotypical, just the average person without mental illness.
Okay.
And everybody's a little quirky in their own way, but 25% of the population in the U.S. has a mental illness, a verifiable, you can measure it, you can treat it.
Okay.
So I have major depressive disorder, which is colloquially known as depression.
Okay.
And people who have that, it lasts anywhere from 3 days to 3 weeks.
Okay.
And it recurs like a flat spot on a wheel.
Okay.
And it's generally not situational. I have been most depressed and most suicidal at some of the best times in my life. Bills paid, mortgage paid off, bookings on the calendar, lovely wife, delightful animals. Life is good.
Yeah.
But so it's not so much, now it can be triggered by a situation like bankruptcy, losing everything, out of work. But generally it's not situational.
Okay.
So it's just the way it's a coping mechanism.
Okay.
Hardwired into my brain. The couple of good news is, one, when I knew that my life insurance policy, I had to wait 2 months to kill myself because I'm willing to do it any time. I thought to myself, I can wait 2 months.
Yeah.
So because I know I can do it.
Okay.
The reason I got into comedy, I was married to a lovely woman who we didn't need to be married. She was lovely, my high school sweetheart, but we really had nothing in common. And I was selling insurance because that's what she wanted me to do. Okay. And I was not going to open mic night, which is what I knew in my heart I should be doing. And I realized, you know what? I'm suicidal. If I don't change something, I'm going to kill myself sooner rather than later. My second thought was, and very empowering, well, wait a minute. I could divorce my wife, quit my job, try comedy. If it works, great. If it doesn't, I can still kill myself. Like most mentally ill people, I thought I was the only one on the planet who ever had those thoughts. Well, since then, and having told the story, half a dozen people, entrepreneurs, comedians, other entertainers have come up and said, I was right there, man. I knew I was married to the wrong person, doing the wrong job. I had this dream, and I thought, I'm going to kill myself. And I thought, well, what the heck? I got nothing to lose by trying. And there are a few things on the planet more powerful than somebody with absolutely nothing to lose. If I stayed put, I was going to die. So, I rolled the dice on comedy, and 35 years later, full time, here I am. And I'm glad I did. I can't imagine looking back, woulda, coulda, shoulda right now. Talk about depressed. I would be devastated. But so that's how my mind works. I believe it's a bit of a superpower in that a lot of people don't understand that suicide is not so much wanting to kill yourself as
Okay.
wanting to end the pain. It's the only
I
way you can,
see.
yeah, it's all about pain. So because
Okay.
I'm willing to do it anytime, any place, anywhere, I can stand a great deal of pain knowing that I'm in control and I can end it whenever.
If people were able to see us, they'd see me sitting here with my mouth wide open because
Yeah.
I'm just
Huh?
kind of like, this is real. People actually think about this. You'll go through your day-to-day life. You could be at the highest point of success, and
Yep.
something like this will cross your mind.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't mind me asking, is there certain things your wife does, or how does she comfort you in times like this? Do you express the feeling to her? Is she scared? After 33 years, has she developed a skill on, okay, this is approach 1, this is approach 2? How does loved ones comfort their significant other during
uh,
times like this?
Good question. She didn't know about it until I'm 64 now. I was 2014. I would have been 58.
Okay.
I came out on stage at the TED Talk as depressed and suicidal. Nobody in my life knew. Not my
Oh,
family, not my friends, not my wife, that I was, when she was getting ready to push play on YouTube to watch my TED Talk.
yeah.
I said, wait, before you do that, I need to tell you about a half a dozen things you don't know about
Oh,
that I don't
my.
want you to learn on the YouTube. So, and I suggest to people that if you are living with mental illness, you share that information with people you know, love, and trust, because it's sort of like a NASCAR race. You need a pit crew around you
Okay.
if when the wheels come off, and eventually, every so often the wheels are going to come off. They need to
Yes.
know what to do, how to do it, what to say, what not to say. And part of the problem is exactly what you said early on, because you've never had that thought. It's hard to wrap your mind around, how could life be that bad?
Yeah.
Now, I've been through tough times, yeah, but how
Mhm.
could it be that bad you want to end it?
Yes.
Well, and that's difficult for people in the family who are not living with mental illness to wrap their mind around, and it's frightening. Even though one person dies by suicide every 9 minutes in the U.S.,
Okay.
hardly anybody talks about it
No.
unless you bring it up. And
Yeah.
then everybody's got a story. It's like they've been waiting for somebody to utter the magic words, depression and suicide, so they can give. People have told me the most amazing thing. People I just met. I do comedy on cruise ships.
Hmm.
I'm in a cruise ship, on a cruise ship. I'm in the Lido buffet. Every
Okay.
ship has a Lido buffet. It's breakfast. We're at sea, so place is packed. Nobody's leaving the ship that day. And I can't find anywhere to sit down. I look over, there's a woman at a table for two. Empty chair. So I catch her attention. I point, she nods, I sit. She looks up, she goes, "Hey, are you the comedian?" I go, "Hey, did you enjoy the comedy show?" She goes, "I love the comedy show." I said, "Then I'm the comedian."
Oh,
She starts laughing. She goes, "What would you have said if I told you I hated it?" They tell me I look a lot like him. So she asked, and people ask this all the time, is cruise comedy all you do? And thank God it's not, because the ship hadn't sailed since the middle of March.
mhm.
I said, "No, I'm a public speaker. And if you don't mind me bragging, because I got nobody else to tell, I just got an email. I just nailed down my first TED Talk." She goes, "I love TED Talks. What's the topic?" Now, I'd had this conversation many times, so I thought I knew what was coming. I said to her, "It's depression and suicide." And I started to count down in my head 3, 2, 1. She goes, "I tried to kill myself twice." We have just met. She goes, "First time in college, kind of half hearted, not a big deal. Second time, Frank, far more serious. I'd graduated college, I graduated medical school, had the knowledge, had the equipment." She said, "I had the IV started in my ankle. Suicide cocktail in one hand, syringe in the other, getting ready to load it up. Phone ring." So she's thinking, do I answer it? Well, I better. Somebody might worry, come over and interrupt.
Mhm.
Picks up the phone, 13-year-old son. She goes, "I don't know if he had a premonition or heard something in my voice, but he said, 'Mom, don't do anything.'" So she said, I didn't. I did not give up on the idea of suicide. However, I decided not to do it that day because I knew he would feel guilty for the rest of his life. Wasn't there something he could do or say to stop my suicide? The good news is suicide is the most preventable cause of death on the planet. Anybody can stop a suicide. So I said to her, well, how old is he now? She goes, he's 21.
Right.
I said, does he know his phone call saved your life? She goes, and this, by the way, became the theme of my TED Talk.
Okay.
She goes, how do you start that conversation? I thought, that's it. Starting the conversation on suicide. Because if you open that door for people, when I speak, I do a 45-minute keynote, 45-ish, and then 15, 30 minutes Q&A for everybody.
Okay.
And then I tell the audience, look, if you've got a question on mental health, mental illness, whatever, that you do not want to ask in front of the entire group, after I'm done, I'll stick around until everybody gets their questions answered. Sometimes it's 2 people, sometimes it's 8. Question for them, for a loved one, looking at resources. It's just the kind of thing that, because it's such a taboo to talk about it out loud, that people they're just primed. If anybody gives them an opening to tell, and some of these people, I met a guy at a comedy gig, and I told everybody at my table that I also spoke on suicide prevention. And he followed me to the bathroom as I told him about my chronic suicidal ideation. And he said, Frank, listen, I got to tell you, I have that. I said, you have what? He goes, I have chronic suicidal ideation. I did not know it had a name. And he goes, and I want you to know, I've never told anybody that before. Now, bear in mind, he's 69. I haven't told my family, and I especially have not told my therapist. And I said, and then I realized, because in California, where I was working, doing the comedy that night, if you tell your clinician that you're depressed and suicidal and have a plan, they are bound by law to have you arrested and go in front of a judge. And you may get a 3-day, all expenses paid vacation.
That's what I was going to tell you. Immediately, it sends alarm bells to people of, oh my gosh, what should I do? This is not good. And it's like red alert, red alert, red alert. So I totally agree when you say that. Who do you tell? Who do you divulge this information to?
They divulge it to me.
Yes, because you open up to people and people are like, oh my God, it's comforting.
Yeah, because, they know that I'm not going to turn them in, and I hear the same music they do. So it's very relatable. And sometimes a 3-day involuntary hold, detention order is very helpful because you can just relax and get some sleep, and somebody else is picking up, bringing you meals.
Gotcha.
I mean, I've had days where I thought, 3 days locked down, they bring me the meals, I just snooze and read. I could dig that. But because my cycle is about 3 days, that'd be perfect.
Okay.
Fellows, good to see you again. Listen, I am a vegetarian, so whatever you're bringing, make sure it's But part of the problem is people are caring in general. They care about other humans, with some exceptions.
Exactly.
And so they want to help you, but they don't say something, I believe, for one of 2 reasons. One, they don't know what to say, or 2, they're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. There's no wives' tale that you should never mention the S word, suicide, in front of somebody who's depressed. And I love the reasoning, because it might give them the idea. Like, it never crossed my mind.
Yeah. And obviously you're telling us, no, these people with this mental illness, I shouldn't say these people, I take that back. People with this mental illness think about this all the time. So saying the S word is not going to be anything new.
No. And as a matter of fact, you should say the S word because silence kills. Here's why. On average, 8 out of 10 people who are suicidal, for whatever reason, are ambivalent. They're not sure they want to do it. And 9 out of 10 people who are suicidal give hints in the last 7 days leading up to an attempt, which tells me that both the 8 out of 10 and the 9 out of 10, they want somebody to notice something and step out of their comfort zone and flat ask them. The trick is, and what I teach when I keynote, I teach the signs and symptoms of depression and thoughts of suicide, what to say, what not to say, what to do, what not to do, so that if you notice someone you believe is depressed, I teach them what to say, and more importantly, probably what not to say. And then if they're having thoughts of suicide, what to say, what not to say, and then how to get resources, and what happens if they're, when do you call 911, and That's
Mhm.
what I teach. That's the learning objective part of my keynote is all about. Because if 8 out of 10 are ambivalent, 9 out of 10 give hints, if you know what to look for and listen for and how to handle it,
Mhm.
like I said, anybody can stop a suicide. You do not have to be a clinician. It just takes knowledge of what to look and listen for
Okay.
and be willing to step out of your comfort zone, and because it's an uncomfortable conversation, even for me.
Very uncomfortable. Is it true that when you have this mental illness, you are always able to rationalize and know, like, okay, like prime example, you said when you felt like taking your life, you knew, you know what? I got to wait 2 months so my wife can be okay. So
Yeah.
she can have that money. Is it always rationalized like this before you do it? Is you always try to debate it in your mind? Do they go through that all the time? And
Well, I think there's a misperception that when you are suicidal, and I was very close to
okay,
suicide, that your
okay,
rational mind has fled the scene, but that's not necessarily true. I mean, the
okay,
irrational part of my brain wanted me to end the pain. The rational part of my brain is no, 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 you're
okay.
not going to do that until 61 days from now because you're not going to leave your wife brokenhearted and broke.
I see. So is it kind of like a good versus evil conversation? It doesn't leave because I guess, like you said, I'm thinking like, oh, that part of the brain is just gone and turned off, and it's not. It's still there, but
Yeah.
it's just one takes over the other. And when someone truly executes a suicide, like prime example, I know you mentioned it in your YouTube video, the three most famous people we know that recently happened, and there's quite a few others. Kate
Oh, yeah.
Spade, Mrs. Doubtfire, I forget, how could I forget his name?
Robin Williams,
Robin Williams, and then the food critic guy.
Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah, and then there's plenty of others, even like children. For children doing this, is this the same mental illness?
Yes, and I've got a friend who attempted at 4 and 8 and 12 years of age.
Why do they exit? And that's the thing. How do they come to that point where this is the final decision? And like you said, it's ending the pain.
Yeah.
What, maybe this is a ignorant question because I don't know because this is just so unfamiliar to me. What
Sure.
is the pain?
Well, it's I guess a psychological pain.
Okay.
For me, my depression feels like somebody's turning up the force of gravity, so it's harder and harder to put one foot in front of the other, and turning down the contrast in the world, so it begins to lose its color.
Okay.
And there are physical manifestations. I said to my wife, besides having trouble putting one foot in front of the other,
Mm-hmm.
it feels like somebody's got their hand wrapped around my heart and they're squeezing really hard.
I
So
see.
there are physical manifestations as well as mental pain.
Okay.
My wife was suffering mightily mentally, not mental illness, but suffering mentally because we lost everything.
Got it.
And I was in charge of the finances. I mean, Goldman Sachs didn't help, but they weren't handling our finances. They just crashed the world economy.
I gotcha.
So, the mortgage-backed securities. So, and oftentimes people with mental illness are more empathetic than neurotypical people. So we not only feel our own pain,
Mm-hmm.
it was her pain that was devastating me. If I'd been single,
Okay.
I would have just told the bank to take a flying leap and packed up and moved on. But it was her pain,
Okay.
and I knew I could fix that. She'd be brokenhearted, but she could get the farm back. She could pay off all the bills and still have enough money to bank. And she was not going to be able to retire, but she would never have to worry about where her next meal was coming from.
Gotcha.
So that's the thought process. What happens is there are three legs on a stool. There's burdensomeness. The world would be better off.
Mm-hmm.
There's social isolation. People tend to either withdraw locally or move.
Okay.
And the third one is you have crossed that barrier where you are willing to end your life. Even infants have an amazing will to live. I mean, they'll fight to live.
Yes.
And so it's survival is probably the number one human instinct. And you've crossed a barrier where you're like, I can do it, regardless of the pain or whatever, mine or anybody else's. And it appears to be selfish from the outside looking in. Didn't you think about the people you were leaving behind? Absolutely. I was leaving my wife behind with $1 million.
Yeah.
I thought she'd be better off with me gone.
Yep.
So that's the three-legged stool.
Okay.
of suicidality.
Gotcha.
Uh, but because I'm 64, because I've lived with this all my life, because I'm doing speaking on suicide prevention
Mm-hmm.
and perhaps saving lives along the way, and it's very because people ask me, does it trigger you to tell these stories?
Yeah.
No, it's actually very therapeutic because
Okay.
it's conceivable I've steered these people far enough off the path to suicide. The ones who have the same illness I have, that they'll live a normal life. It's
Okay.
almost like the character George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. He tells
Mm-hmm.
the angel he wishes he wasn't born,
Uh-huh.
and then the angel shows him what Bedford Falls will be like, and all the people. Well, for me, I've been shown what these people's lives would be like if I weren't there to speak and simply reassure them they're not alone. And if I kill myself, then I would take a lot of those people with me because they never had anybody come in and demystify it, destigmatize it, and go, hey, no, it has a name. It's a thing.
Frank, your story is amazing. Now, for those people who are thinking like that right now, what is one or two words of advice you have to offer them? Because again, this is so educational for me because I've never thought like this. I didn't even realize such a thing existed. And if I've run into a financial issue, it's not something I think about. I just like, fuck it. You ain't getting your money this month. When I'm able to get my shit together, that's when you go and get your money. That's my thinking. But obviously, everyone is not thinking like Shirley.
Now, my sister, by the way, when she first got her first checking account, they were having financial problems. So she would write checks for all the bills,
Mm-hmm.
put them in the mail. And I go, Jane, you don't have enough money to cover all those bills. She goes, you know what? I consider it a first come, first serve. You get there first, you get the money.
Okay, so I like your sister's thinking. And your sister is not. She doesn't have the mental illness, does she?
Yeah. Oh, everybody in my family except one cousin. My sister lives with depression and anxiety, panic attacks.
Wow.
My
Okay.
cousin, everybody in pretty much in my family, especially on my mother's side, has one issue. I have one cousin who has no mental illness issues, and he doesn't have the family high cholesterol,
Okay.
and we hate him with a passion. Not really. He's a wonderful guy, but he dodged both those bullets.
Oh.
If somebody here's what worries me, Joy.
Mm-hmm.
The pandemic, and I've been doing podcast after podcast on this topic.
The pandemic. Oh my goodness.
I've got a keynote I wrote shortly after my last engagement in March called Social Distancing and Staying Sane. Don't worry so much about your mentally ill friends. Because if you have mental illness, you wake up in an uncertain world every day.
Every day, I believe it.
And if you're high functioning, you have systems in place so you can get out of bed in the morning.
Yes.
I have a self-care plan. I've been teaching people who are neurotypical what a self-care, because why would you have that if you were, never been depressed?
Mm-hmm.
And mine is diet. I'm on the keto diet and I do intermittent fasting. Exercise. I got some home exercise equipment. Good night's sleep is restorative. Meditation. I meditate twice a day. And medication. I'm on medication. Just a small amount of one that just takes the edge off. So that's my self-care plan. I said also because almost everybody's routine has been blown completely out of the water. What you need to do is you need to reestablish a routine. You need to take control of things you can control.
Got it.
They asked an astronaut who'd been in the space station for a year by himself, how in the world do you stand that social isolation? He said, simple, routine. He goes, I go to bed same time every day. I get up same time every morning. I eat my meals roughly same time, exercise same time, binge watching Netflix and the Queen's Gambit same time. So he's just got a routine, and I have a routine. I control the things I can, and I just let the rest of it go. There's nothing I can do about the number of doses of the vaccine or people not wearing masks or whatever it happens to be.
Got it.
So I counsel people who may be what's called situational depression, because of the pandemic, because of the uncertainty. A friend of mine says like this, Frank. If I said to you, can you run 20 miles? Yeah, I believe I can. It's not going to be in a record time, but I bet you I could do it. He goes, you know why you could do it? Because at mile 15, you're thinking to yourself, oh man, 3/4 of the way through 5 miles, I got this. If I came to you and said, I want you to run, how long? Don't know. When can I stop? Not real sure. I'm I'm not going to be so excited about strapping on my Nikes and heading out the door.
No.
That's kind of where we are with the pandemic, is that we have
Okay.
no idea. Is it going to be another surge? What about the new varieties?
Mm-hmm.
You know, fortunately, as we're recording this, the number of cases are coming down steadily
Yes.
in the U.S. So, and schools are beginning to reopen, and restaurants here in my town finally are going to be able to have indoor dining.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's just, here's the thing about mental illness. I don't think a lot of people who don't live with it don't understand. There's a Greek character named Sisyphus,
Okay.
and he gave fire to man. That was his big crime. And the rest of the gods were mad. So they sentenced him to roll a rock up a hill every day. And the idea was, once he got the rock over the top of the hill and down the other side, he could retire. Well, wouldn't you know it, every time he got close to the top of the hill, the rock would roll back down to the bottom of the hill and he'd have to start over the next morning. Having a mental illness is like that. Every morning when you wake up, there's a rock in the hill. Now, some days the rock is small and the hill is not so steep.
Mm-hmm.
Some days the rock is a boulder and the hill is Kilimanjaro. But every day, without fail, there's a rock and a hill. And with Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade and Robin Williams, the day came when they simply couldn't move the rock.
It got heavy.
Yeah, and bear in mind, Bourdain, very popular. He's a show on CNN,
Yeah.
something. And Kate Spade had started out as I think she worked her way up to the head of the accessories department at Vanity Fair.
Okay.
My guess is she said to herself, I'm not supposed to be reviewing other people's fashions. I should have a fashion line of my own.
Mm-hmm.
She may have been suicidal at that point and thought, what the heck? I'll quit my job, start my own fashion line, see what happens. And of course, it was wildly successful. Anthony
Yes.
Bourdain loved food.
Yeah.
His folks took him to France when he was 8 years old. He fell in love with food. So all through high school, he worked at restaurants. He went to Vassar, great college, and he worked at restaurants. And finally, I'm betting, he said to himself, you know, Vassar's a great college, and I've got a great major. I'll probably get a good job when I get done.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not me. It's called individuation. You have to ask yourself, is who I am really who I am? And I think both those people thought no. So Anthony Bourdain quit college, went to the Culinary Institute or whatever, figuring, what the heck? I stay at Vassar, I'm going to kill myself. I might as well roll the dice on culinary. Of course, wildly successful.
Exactly.
So yeah, so it's again, with nothing to lose, why not? And Robin was wildly popular. Money in the Bank.
Funny.
You know, funny. People loved him. I mean, he was beloved by I never met anybody who didn't like him. I worked with him a couple of times in San Diego. A nice, sweet guy, not frenetic off stage, just an average guy. But he had, I believe he was living with bipolar.
Gotcha.
He never mentioned that in an interview. He always talked about his drug and alcohol addiction.
Yeah, I heard of that.
In treatment and recovery, and joked about that, but never once mentioned, as far as I know, about his, what I believe was bipolar.
Okay.
And then he had a heart surgery, had a valve replaced, and that can depress you. I know, because I've had it done twice.
Okay.
And then he developed a Parkinson's-like ailment where it was affecting his memory. And you're an actor.
Mm-hmm.
My memory is I think he just, he woke up one morning and just couldn't move the rock. And so,
That's a great analogy that you give, that you woke up one morning and you couldn't move the rock. Frank, I appreciate you coming on this podcast, educating people about this, because I did not know. You just enlightened me today, because I was one of those people out there ignorant. And even me, I need more education on how to speak to someone who's going through this, because I wouldn't even know what to say. This whole conversation with you, I'm just still sitting here speechless that people actually think this way, because this is not something that's never crossed my mind.
People say to me, I don't know anybody with mental illness. Oh, yes, you do. It's like in the 70s, people used to say, I don't know anybody who's gay. Oh, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
You just don't know. If you've got time, I'll give you a thumbnail sketch up. Okay.
Yeah.
So in mental health, we do this. We use this metaphor: upstream, midstream, downstream. So upstream means you want to spot the signs and symptoms.
Okay.
So people ask me, well, what am I looking for in depression? Well, have trouble getting out of bed in the morning and rallying in the afternoon. They eat too much or can't eat, sleep too much, or they just can't sleep.
Okay.
And here's one you can actually notice on Zoom. If you Zoom with somebody on a regular basis and you Zoom in one morning
Okay.
and you think to yourself, hair's a little dirty, clothes doesn't look like, the same thing I had on last time. Looks a little, It
Okay.
may be they're depressed because they can't drag themselves out of bed to shower and run a little water.
I see.
So
So
that's
paying attention to little signs is
personal
important.
hygiene, the
Okay.
changes.
Okay.
When I talk to dentists, I speak to dentists because they have a high rate of suicide. And I teach them what to look for with their patients. I said, look, if you get a patient come in, and again, their hair's a little dirty, clothes aren't, recently washed, and you look in their mouth, and they've always been really good about dental care.
Gotcha.
And you think, I don't think he's flossing anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just letting his personal hygiene go. Okay.
Okay.
So the question comes up, what do you say? Here's what you don't say.
Okay.
Turn that frown upside down. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Have you tried fish oil? Yeah, trust me, I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. What you do say is this: look, I'm here for you, and I mean it. I mean, I really don't understand. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around where you're going through, but I know you are not crazy, lazy, or self-absorbed. I know that depression is a mental illness. Now, here's the good news. Undoubtedly, with time and treatment, things will get better. I will take the time. I will help you get that treatment. And here's the tough one. You have to ask them flat out, are you having thoughts of suicide? Just like that. If you can't ask that, you find somebody who can utter that phrase. Now, let's say they're not
terrifying.
I know.
To ask someone that?
Yeah. Or you haven't thought of suicide. Well, let's say they're not forthcoming. They really are, but they don't tell you. How would you know? Well, look for these signs. They talk about death and dying. You catch them Googling death and dying. Death and dying appears as a theme in their artwork, their music, their writing.
Okay.
I have a friend whose son died by suicide. Mm-hmm. He was a musician. He had a notebook he carried with him everywhere, including the bathroom. Mm-hmm. He did not want his mom looking in that notebook when he wasn't aware she was doing it. And he ended his life. And she, of course, she inherited the notebook and she began thumbing through, and the lyrics were chock full of all this darkness.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's a theme somehow in their life. They're putting their affairs in order.
Okay.
Especially if they're giving away prized possessions. They want to make sure they go to the person they want them to go to when they're gone. And if they give away a pet, that's sort of the top of the heap.
Okay.
They just want to make sure the pet's taken care of when they're gone.
Okay.
Stockpiling medications or buying a handgun or gun is a sign. Here's a counterintuitive one that's extremely dangerous. They've been depressed forever. And then one day, they're happy beyond measure and for no apparent reason. And you're happy because, thank the Lord, they're happy. Well, they may be happy because, and you'll see we come full circle on this, they may be happy because they have chosen time, place, and method, and they know the pain is finite, and that's why they're happy. They know it's about to come to an end. So
there's an opposite to this, to what you just said. They could either go from happy to depressed, and then it can turn from depressed to really happy because they know the day is coming.
The day is coming. And it's very dangerous because you're happy because they're happy finally. Oh,
yeah.
Lord. Yeah, that's so here's the thing I tell people, how do you get around that? Well, there's no perfect way, but here's what I do. Mm-hmm. If you ask them, are they suicidal? Not only listen to what they say, watch their facial expressions and their body language. Sometimes that will give away their true feelings. My mom, when I was a kid, I'd be frowning about something and my lip stuck out. She would say, don't trip over that lower lip. She goes, anything wrong? Mom, nothing's wrong. Well, you need to let your face know about that. Because my face would be giving me away that something was wrong. Now, let's say they do say, yes, I must admit I'm having thoughts of suicide. What do you say? You say, do you have a plan? And if they have a plan, what is your plan? If it's detailed, time, place, method, your job as a mental health first responder is to get them on the telephone with the suicide prevention lifeline.
Okay.
And if they won't pick up the phone, you pick up the phone, you call the lifeline, the volunteer will do what they can, talk the phone into the hand of the person who's in crisis. Now, for younger people, who are more into texting than phone calls, there's now a suicide prevention text line.
Okay.
Text the word help to 741-741. And there'll be somebody roughly their age on the other end texting back.
Okay.
Question comes up, when do you call the police? If they're a danger to themselves, immediate danger to themselves or somebody else, you have to call the police. But that's going to buy them a court appearance. The judge is going to decide whether to do the involuntary detention order or not.
Okay.
So know that that's going to happen. Then they're probably going to unfriend you on Facebook, but
they're not going to talk to you.
Yeah, but they'll be alive, which is all I care about. So that's the protocol for, are you depressed? And I always tell people, go with your gut. If you walk by somebody and the word depression pops into your head when you see them, you may have been picking up clues or hints that you weren't aware of, but your brain was aware of. And all of a sudden, it's called the collective unconscious, I think, where you've been picking up signals, but not consciously, but your brain's been processing it. You walk by him and you go, oh, he looks depressed.
Yeah.
And you look back and you go, his clothes aren't that clean. His hair's a little dirty. Frank mentioned that. I was at a conference in August of 2019, a big safety con. I did a breakout on men's mental health. And the guy came up afterwards, because I did the general Q&A, and then I said, if you got questions, he comes up afterwards and burst into tears. And what had happened is he had been at work. He had told his boss that he was depressed and suicidal. His boss's advice was this: you got to get over that.
Yeah.
Why didn't I think of that? However, there's a happy ending to the story, and here's why. He had already decided time, place, method. He knew there were 2 cars in the parking lot where he worked that were unlocked. Both had a gun in the glove compartment. He was actually on his way, after talking to his boss, to one of those cars at lunch to pull the trigger. He walked by a coworker. They spoke, hey. And his coworker felt like something was wrong. So went with his intuition, turned around, caught up with him, and goes, hey, man, what's wrong? Well, nothing's wrong. No, something's wrong. Let's go back to my office, close the door. Goes back to his office, closes the door, and the guy just melts.
That's a blessing.
And told him the whole story.
Oh, wow.
I was depressed, suicidal, had a plan. The boss said this. And ideally, and this is what his friend did, drove him directly to a mental health facility. He went in voluntarily for a voluntary 3-day hold. And then that helped him get medicated and also, put a self-care plan into place. And then he did pretty intensive outpatient therapy. And that's why he was at that meeting that day, because had his coworker not sensed something wrong, decided to go with his intuition, stepped out of his comfort zone, and taken him back to his office, that young man would be, because he'd already got his
everything planned
in order. He'd given away his prized possessions, which he had to go back and pick up, which his friends were like, fine, take the Xbox 5. I'm glad you're still alive. So that's why I say go with your gut. If you think, wait, something's wrong, something's off. And again, I'm worried about people in the pandemic who've never been depressed. And so they may not realize or understand why they can't get out of bed. Now, here's the upside of that, Shirley. A lot of people who've never been depressed in their lives will have been depressed in the pandemic. And I'm hoping they'll have a lot more respect and a lot less stigma for people who live with mental illness, because they've had a chance to get a little taste.
Yeah, because it's real.
Yeah, and it's, that's what I go through. I had my good days, more good days than bad. But I had a heart attack 2014, right before my TED Talk, 2 weeks before my TED Talk. I was in the woods with a dog all by myself. I had T-Mobile, so I didn't have cell service. And I know it always gets a laugh. Yeah. And had a heart attack because I've had 2 heart surgeries, and it presented same spot in my, my back, the pain. But with the heart valve that I had replaced, if I stopped moving, the angina would cease.
Gotcha.
But it just kept getting worse and worse. And I'm a half mile from the car with a dog. And what I'm worried about is the dog, because if I don't get them back in the car, there's a very, very busy road another 25 yards from the car, and they're going to be out there. And
Exactly.
we're like the Marine Corps. We don't leave anybody behind. So I said in my mind, I don't care if I drop dead once I get the dogs in the car, because my wife will come look and they'll be safe. And also, people ask me, well, you're going down the hill back to the car, having the heart attack. I mean, did you see a light? Did you hear your dead relatives' voices? You know, what was going through your mind? And I said, do you really want to know? And they go, yeah. I go, I'm crying. Not because of the pain. I'm crying because 2 weeks from that day, I have a TEDx talk on suicide prevention, starting the conversation on suicide. And I'm thinking to myself, how many people I could have saved had I made it to that TEDx.
Yeah.
And I'm weeping. And fortunately, I got back to the car and I drove 2 miles home.
And
now, here's the
everything.
punchline, Shirley.
What's up?
I go in the house. I don't want to pick up the phone and dial 911 because what if I pass out before I can say anything? My wife comes out and finds me on the floor in the kitchen on a Saturday morning. So I yell to my wife, honey, I'm having a heart attack. Dial 911. I hear this. I'm in the bathroom. I got the fan on. I can't hear you. I'm thinking, I walked a half mile, drove 2, and I'm going to die in my hallway. This is not fair.
Yeah. Did
She
you
came
call?
out. No, she came out, took one look at my face,
Okay.
grabbed the phone, and we, fortunately, Shirley, where we live, there are 3 EMTs that live along our street. So
Oh,
when she
nice.
dialed 911 and they geolocated where she was, all their cell phones went off. They were at my house in their personal cars in 90 seconds.
Nice. That's nice.
And then they transported me to the hospital, and obviously I survived. But and here's something about that day that a lot of people don't know or understand. If I'd been in a bad place that day and suicidal on that hill, I could have simply sat down and let the heart attack run its course and die a very socially acceptable death. Only the dogs would know that I chose to end my life. Everybody else would just, the paramedics would come, they'd look at, how my body looked. They would obviously realize it was a heart attack.
Exactly.
They'd look at my cell phone. Why didn't he call? Oh, it's T-Mobile.
No service.
No service. So, because a lot of people think if you're depressed and suicidal, it's 24/7, 365. And I have far more good days than bad. With chronic suicidal ideation, I'm sitting in a railroad crossing. The lights are flashing, the arms coming down, and I'm looking at the train thinking, if I pull in the tracks, I would do it. That's a very chronic suicidal ideation thought, is in instances, and that's not a normal thought.
Okay.
Normal people don't look at the train and think, if I pull the car on the tracks, that'd be that.
I guess I fall under that category because I'm not thinking of that.
No, you're not thinking of that. You're not driving down the highway looking ahead at a bridge abutment thinking, if I just turn the wheel a little bit, boom,
Nope.
I'm done. No.
Nope.
But when I find people who have chronic suicidal ideation, I go, just out of curiosity, you ever sit at a railroad crossing? Oh my God. I thought it was just me. No, not just you, brother. So anyway, that's how to spot it, what to say, what not to say, oh, by the way, if they're suicidal, don't say you're just looking for attention, you're being melodramatic. Nobody who talks about it ever does it. That's common. And it's not mean humans. It's just they don't know what to say.
They don't know what to say.
No. So, that now your listeners, A, know what to look for. B, know what to say. C, know what not to say.
Yes.
And if you're interested in learning about mental health, there's an organization called mentalhealthfirstaid.org. They have an 8-hour class on adult mental health and an 8-hour class on youth mental health. And even when they do them live, they're only like $5 to $25 for the entire thing.
Okay.
It's a great mental health 101, everything from depression to suicide to non-lethal self-harm, like cutting, biting, burning, that young people tend to do.
Yes.
And so, and they give you a binder. So if you think somebody's having an issue, you open the binder, you turn to whatever you think they're dealing with. It'll have a solid list of symptoms.
Okay.
And then suggestions on resources and what to say and what not to say. So it's a great, very inexpensive class. mentalhealthfirstaid.org.
Wonderful. Oh my gosh, Frank, you have provided us with a wealth of knowledge today. Now, all your information will be on the website for people to find you, and the coaching classes that you provide are all on your website. I did go and I realized there's like links that people can click on to go do any coaching classes. The website that you just provided, I will provide that as well. Frank, I mean, this information here was eye-opening for me, and I know it's going to be eye-opening for someone else, because you have helped me realize that I need to be mindful of our words. We don't know how deadly our words are to people, and we don't even understand what people are going through. Pay attention to your loved ones.
Yep.
If they're having a bad day, even if they went from bad to good very quickly, pay attention to these signs that your family members are giving, because they are so important. Watch your words and be mindful of how you speak to people, because one thing can throw somebody off, and we don't realize that, because I feel like at times we're also self-absorbed and we're worried about self and what's going on with me and what's happening with me, that we don't take the time just to pay attention to our neighbor or our coworker, because it doesn't have to be someone you're in a romantic relationship with. It could
No.
be in a platonic situation.
Yeah. Friend, family member,
Exactly.
coworker.
Pay attention. But as we end today, Frank, again, thank you. And for those of you listening, please, if you even have the thought of suicide, definitely go check Frank's website out. He has a wealth of information to provide.
And my
Because
phone number's there.
oh, your phone number's on there?
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
what I tell people is, if you're suicidal, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline.
Okay.
If you're just having a really bad day, call a crazy person, and my number's on my website.
Oh, that's so thoughtful of you. Oh my
Well,
gosh.
And people call, not all the time, but
I know what you
occasionally.
mean. Yeah, because at that time you want someone to talk to. And me, I can't, even now I'm still extremely speechless, because I've never had these thoughts. So this is a major learning experience for me, because
Well,
Shirley can't pay her bills this month. Fine, you not getting no money, and I'm going to continue on with my life. But obviously, some people don't think it like that.
No, and with the evictions and bankruptcies and foreclosures with the pandemic,
yeah,
it's more important than ever to look after one another. Each one save one, say something, step up, because obviously, if they're 8 out of 10 and 9 out of 10, they want you to notice and step in. Anybody can save a life.
Yep. And they don't know how to tell you. This is not an easy conversation for everyone just to start. You're not going to call your mom, your aunt, or your sister and say, hey, listen, I feel like killing myself today, because you already know the other person. What? Oh, my God.
Teenagers, young people, the rate of suicide is going up because of the home, being schooled at home and not being able to participate in athletics, and because parents don't want to think there's anything wrong with their child's anything but perfect.
Exactly.
They think it'll pass. It's hormones. It's puberty. There were kids who were they would pull up a page on their computer and leave the computer on, and the page was, how do you kill yourself? Hoping the parents would notice and step in, because they couldn't bring themselves to tell, or they've told the parent that they're, they believe they're depressed and they're having thoughts of suicide. And, it's, oh yeah, when I was young, I think the problem is adults don't remember the depth of the pain that young people can experience.
I always say, as adults, we become hypocrites, because I think for a moment we forget that we were children at one point in time and how it felt. And once we turn 18, it's like we erase that whole childhood part of our lives and we act like it never existed.
Yeah, and the classic example is puppy love. I can remember, I have vivid memories of my first girlfriend, breaking up with me. And so if a young person is in a relationship and then they break up, parents, because like you said, they forget that first 18 years of their lives.
Yeah.
They forget just how painful that puppy love. It's devastating. Every song I heard on the radio is some kind of breakup song, it seemed like.
Exactly.
My life was over. Ellen Hip doesn't love me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Oh my gosh, Frank, thank you so much. And as we end today, I always like to end to say, love yourself, voice yourself, and be yourself. And until the next podcast, guys, you guys have a great, great day. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to Fun Palais Podcast. If you want to continue the conversation or share your takeaways, I want to hear from you. Head on over to the website or join our Facebook community and comment your favorite part of the show or share your thoughts. I want to hear what you have to say. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Chat with you next week.